all heard the Saints Go Marching In, or What a Wonderful World. Whether it be by his amazing musicianship or his warming smile, we have all encountered the reach of Louis Armstrong. Armstrong is a prime example of what can come from sheer optimism. He was born into a poor family but still strived for greatness and didn't stop until his last breath. He has captivated millions of people from multiple generations through his songs and inspired many with this endless sense of optimism no matter what the circumstances. Louis Armstrong was born on August 1st, 1901, straight to New Orleans, Louisiana. His father, William Armstrong, left with another woman when Louis was an infant. His mother, Mary Albert, left him and his sister, Beatrice, in the care of their Aunt Josephine. She brought them back when Louis was 5 years old to live with her and other relatives, and he only saw his father in parades. He worked very hard to bring in money by delivering papers and selling coal, but that wasn't enough to keep his mother away from prostitution. He eventually received his first formal music education in the Colored Wolf's Home for Boys, where he was allegedly confined for a year and a half as punishment for firing blanks from his father's gun into the air on New Year's Eve. He later dropped out at age 11 and joined a quartet of boys who sang in the streets for money. He was mentored by Joey Oliver, who continued to teach Louis how to play by ear and would even let him sub for him in his band from time to time. He would play on riverboats and in parades, and would even listen to older jazz legends every chance he got. In 1919, Joey Oliver decided to go north and resigned his position in Kid Ory's band, and Armstrong replaced him. He also became second trumpet for the Tuxedo Brass Band, a society band popular in that time period. All of this prepared him for a long career in jazz and big band music. On March 19th, 1918, Armstrong married Daisy Parker. They adopted Clarence Armstrong, the son of Armstrong's sister, who died after childbirth. He was plagued with mental disorder, and Armstrong took care of him for the rest of his life. The marriage, however, did not work, and they eventually divorced. Throughout this time, Armstrong continued to expand musically, learning to read music by the time he was 20 years old. Because of this new ability, he became one of the first jazzmen to play extended trumpet solos or cornet solos. He would play the arrangements but add his own embellishments to them and accompany that with his ability to sing. In 1922, Armstrong joined the exodus to Chicago, where he had been invited by his mentor, Joey King Oliver, to join his Creole jazz band. He was very successful there and was often challenged to cutthroat contests by other hornmen who wanted to disrupt his record of playing 200 high C's in a row and potentially break down the phenomenon, but it never worked. Later, Armstrong remarried to Little Hardin Armstrong, who encouraged him to break away from Oliver and strive for his own prominent billing. He left for a year and played for the Fletcher Henderson's band in several recordings, and eventually returned back to Chicago from New York. He continued to play for some of the best colored orchestras and widened his knowledge of music more with the push from his wife to play more classical music. Armstrong later went on to record under his own name after straying from the Henderson Orchestra, changing the face of jazz as we know it. Eventually, he split from Little Hardin and continued to move multiple times between New York and Chicago, and ended up landing in Los Angeles in 1930 for a fresh start. While bouncing in between New York and Chicago, Armstrong had worked up some debts and bad relations with the mob. Every move he would make, the mob would shadow him and eventually insisted that he got out of town. So he went to New Orleans and saw some old family and friends, and when that didn't work, he fled to Europe. Once Armstrong returned to the States, he began to go on many exhausting tours, causing him to have problems with his lips and fingers because of his unique but incorrect playing style. His agent, Johnny Collins' erratic behavior and his own spending left Armstrong very short of cash. Breaching of contract violations plagued him constantly. Finally, he hired Joe Glacier as his new manager. a tough mob-connected wheeler dealer who began to not only fix his debts, but his mob-related issues as well. As a result, he branched out, developing his vocal style and making his first theatrical appearances in Pennies from Heaven and Rudy Valley, and was also the first African American to host a sponsored national broadcast. Throughout all of these productions, Armstrong divorced Little in 1938 and married his longtime girlfriend, Alpha. This marriage, just like the others, didn't last. He settled down finally in Queens, New York, with his fourth wife, Lucille, in 1943. For the next 30 years, he played 300 shows a year, fighting all odds of the time period, including racism and segregation. Eventually, times changed, and the Armstrong band that he had developed was no longer called for. So in 1947, a new six-piece band was put together to cater to the new culture taking over the nation. After switching to swing music, Armstrong appeared in over 30 films and recorded several new songs, including the #1 hit Hello Dolly, and was the first jazz musician to appear on the cover of Time magazine on February 21st, 1949. Within the last years of his life, Armstrong toured Africa, Europe, and Asia under sponsorship of the U.S. State Department. This is where his nickname, Ambassador Satch, originated from. Despite health complications, he continued to play his songs with energy and endlessness he was known for. He played up until he died of a heart attack in his sleep on the night of July 6, 1971. Throughout his 69 years of life, he went from a juvenile facility to some of the most prominent ballrooms in the country, playing his horn and singing his way to the top. Despite all barriers pulling against him, whether it be racism, health, or financial problems, Armstrong stayed optimistic and pushed through. This is why we still hear of him in his music today. He will always be the father of jazz.
Yay!